Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this week's edition of Fake Accents Unite. I apologise for the state of my voice this evening, and if I drop down being a little bit quieter than usual. I'm still a little bit out of sorts, as it were, thanks to this damned frog in my throat. And speaking of frogs, I am joined by this evening Froggy. Good evening, sir.
Hello, and I've definitely been in his throat.
Moving
On that
swiftly
note.
on, and as usual with the ever technophobic Britisher. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Pleasure to have you both on this evening.
Shall we just draw a veil over that entire chorus line that you met, or shall we talk about it?
I mean, you can bring it up again if you like, Britisher.
I just thought, I'd kind of point out the reason as to why you reached the point of physical exhaustion to the extent where you couldn't actually do a live stream on Monday.
Live stream on Monday, there were multiple factors. Basically, I had this hideous cold, which was precipitated on the Sunday, and followed on. Which then turned into this horrendous sore throat, although thankfully the sinal stuff went away. And all this following what I presume was the UKIP Southeast Conference that I attended on the Saturday.
You see, ladies and gentlemen, he's trying to make it sound as mundane and boring as possible, and tries to avoid the mention of the 4, 5, or 6 bucks and blondes. What can I say?
They were brunettes, actually, British.
Well, there you go. See,
I have some class.
I always get those details wrong.
I like to have the intellectual conversation that blondes simply do not provide.
Well, then again, there may have been fake blondes, but you were able to verify.
Oh, really? The lifestyle that you ascribe to in British never ceases to amaze. What has been going on this past week, though? That's what I'm curious about. I haven't seen masses in the news, although I understand the Tory leadership contest is coming to a close this week. Is it this week? Because Theresa May has just given her final.
Yes, I think
closing
22nd is the last day. So I think as of 23rd they will have a new leader.
Oh, very exciting. Is it still Boris Johnson way ahead in the lead?
Yes, and he is just basically playing it as safe as he possibly can. I've just seen him on the BBC answer a question whether he is a feminist with yes.
Ooh.
And then immediately sort of follow that up by saying, oh, well, it's really just about the sexes being equal, yada, 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 fairness, yada, yada, yada. The famous kind of Mott and Bailey technique.
You can't care about the equality of the sexes. You can't care about the equality of the sexes and be a feminist now, British. I mean, that's an oxymoronic statement.
Well, yes, but do you understand what I mean? I think what he is doing is basically he knows he's way out ahead, and therefore he will just roll out every trope possible that doesn't rock the boat, because he knows
what happened to Rob.
Anything that effectively creates some sort of ruckus has the potential to dislodge him from the leading position. So I think he is being perfectly cynical. One would wish that he would perhaps have a little more of the backbone of saying, this is utter rubbish. But I think he is just being the utter politician here.
Has Hunt said anything interesting to parry him?
Who?
Jeremy Jezza.
Well, I mean, that's where we've pretty much arrived at. I mean, I think the media is now pretty much glued on Boris because everybody knows what's going to happen.
It's a landslide.
There was one thing I tweeted out just earlier when I was watching the BBC, and that was just having to remind myself of this whole thing. You know, about a year ago or so, there was this chap who tried to crash through the barriers at Parliament.
Oh, yes. Whose hand slipped or something.
Yeah, he's just been found guilty of attempted murder.
Oh, right.
And it announced how he has been found guilty of attempted murder, and he was described as a student from Birmingham. And I just sat there and I just thought, hang on a moment, so I can just tweet it out. What does it take these days to be, to be deemed a terrorist? So in court itself, one has moved away. One did not effectively charge him with terrorism. One suggested it might have been a motive or something like that. So here is a chap from deepest Sudan who then comes over here and studies at Birmingham, and then one day in the center of London suddenly decides to try to run over several people and then tries to smash through the security barrier that leads into the Houses of Parliament.
To be perfectly honest, at this point, I'd be almost happy abolishing students. I don't know about you. What do you think, Froggy?
I think we should call them something else and maybe replace. I think the institution of university is probably a good target to go after, but I think it's probably rotting itself out in at the moment. I've seen something that I've sort of followed, and I've had a few conversations on Twitter about it, called the Lambda School, and basically it's free training, but they're selective on who they pick, and then they want something like a third of your salary for 2 or 3 years. But they train you up to get you into really high paying like technical jobs or things like project management or like a technical skill. But I guess it'll be like some of the newer technical skills where they know they're rare and they can get you paid. So they get you out onto the market. And I can't see universities being a thing forever. So we might not get rid of students, but
the trouble with universities is they are not competitive. The reason universities are a thing is because they are the gatekeepers to legally being able to pursue some professions. So, for instance, obviously, if you want to do certain jobs, you need to be rated in certain ways, and therefore you must have this particular degree. But also, the degree has become now an entry. Like, so, for instance, especially to a lot of STEM field subjects, it's very difficult to get a sideline into those industries without a degree. Certainly something like what I'm pursuing, so clinical psychology, you must have an accredited degree. There is no other way to do it. You cannot come in any other way. You must do it.
But a lot of the market isn't that, though. Do you know what I mean? The general job market, a lot of the general job market isn't that.
No, I understand. It's just that I think really universities generate a lot of their legitimacy off of these niche sort of highly qualified jobs where they are the gatekeepers to those industries. And the rest of it is, for lack of a better term, fluff.
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly when it comes to sort of the STEM areas and whatever, isn't it? I mean, if when it comes to sort of astrophysics or something like that, you kind of wonder where else you could do that other than with universities.
Well, of course, the big one that's causing controversy at the moment is basically computing classes. So programming and so on, because I know certainly, like I did my A-levels in computing and computer science and all that jazz, and I could do Java programming and all sorts back when that was relevant. But like a lot of the universities are either behind when it comes to these things, and a lot of students get their knowledge through effectively side courses or events that are put on by companies, especially for something like so I got a friend who works in video game development, and she got almost exclusively her modern video game development because she was able to program things like, I don't know, like a Metroid clone and stuff like that through the university. But all the money, for instance, in that particular industry at the moment is in mobile gaming, and she got all of that experience from game jams, which are 24-hour game contests about writing in this particular language, and you have to learn how to do it in order to do it. So but there's also obviously, for less on the entertainment side, but more in just sort of general data entry and that sort of side of things, and those sorts of programs, a lot of database management work, SQL, that sort of thing. There are now apprenticeships which are being offered, particularly by local councils who do not want to pay effectively a graduate wage to someone to sort their SQL database. They'd be much happier training you up to be in computer science on apprenticeship wage. You basically learn part-time at the university, build their database for them as your job, and then they get a database on the cheap, and you get a degree out of it, which is certainly one way to look at it. That sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, you don't need a degree for a lot of IT work now. I think it's more
the
more
curious thing I've noticed is that the money is not in the university professions so much anymore. Like for a very small percentage, it is. So something like, you look at fields which will always be high paid and typically always be there. Legal.
You say legal, because I was gonna, not all of legal is high paid, is it? I mean,
no, exactly.
If you go to a good law school and then go out to become a partner somewhere, but most people that go to a legal degree don't do that. They end up, going into PI or personal injury or probate or
that's why I said a small percentage, because it's even a small percentage within those professions. But most of the money that I see coming in, especially given we have things like the current housing crisis, are in trade work, which I think is bizarrely and not criminally, but just bizarrely underrepresented as like something you want to be pushing your students towards doing. I know that, for instance, even the local. So when I went to college, that's high school, the end of high school for any Americans in the chat. When I went to college, we had a vocational college attached to my college, which actually did stuff. Now that's closed down, and I mean, even before my time, I'm not sure British will remember. Obviously, being raised on the continent,
banks of the river Euphrates, about 5,000 years ago. Yes,
Mesopotamia. Things like the polytechnics, which obviously we used to run and stuff like that. But I think we're sort of seeing a kind of slip back into that. I know a number of I don't know what the denotion of academy means nowadays, but I seem to see that an awful lot of community schools which were funded by the government are becoming academies now, or are they slipping back under government control? I don't know.
I don't know that much about schools.
I'm hardly an expert in the field of the British education system, but I think when it comes to the academies, wasn't it that they brought in people from outside, or some sort of sponsors to the school? They didn't necessarily even have to put that much money in, and then there would be some kind of outside element that would be involved in the running of the school. So I think it was sort of a desperate attempt to kind of create some sort of independence within the schools.
Yes, they're not it's not a sign of a successful school, insofar as I'm aware, that's standing on its own merits. But I mean, if they can't get enough funding from, the state, as it were, then I suppose it's the only thing they can do to.
So academies are run by private business, but funded by the state, but they've got more freedom. So I guess that's what they call charter schools in America, is it? Academies, same sort of thing.
Interesting concept. Tim Cornish has sent $10 through. Thank you very much. He's always quite keen, is Tim. Says the Britishers Eeyore playing to NSO's Winnie the Pooh some weeks. Are you feeling a bit like Eeyore today, Britisher?
Oh, I always feel like Eeyore, surely.
I mean, did it come through on the week that was? Have you lost your tail?
I don't know. I mean, it may have been. Maybe my tail was bitten off at yesterday's rendition of Unpopular Opinions. Who knows?
Oh dear, I didn't catch Unpopular Opinions yesterday. What happened?
Oh, they tried to make him get off his fence.
Well, it was rather the opposite. It was that they all got annoyed that they were all there, sort of combined in brotherly love on one side of the fence, whereas I was firmly on the other side.
Oh dear.
And
This is just like when you got into an argument about whether or not the Western civilization started in Egypt or Mesopotamia.
Yeah, pretty much along those lines. Although that's rather funny, because I was once ticked off by someone who made a reaction video about me, in which, when I spoke of the Western core, I was then corrected. Oh, well, of course, it wasn't Western, it was the Middle East, you Burke. Without him realizing that the Western core is exactly that. It is Mesopotamia and Egypt, whereas the Eastern core is China. But, we left him in his state of ignorance. Yesterday it kind of went into, is there such thing as, harmful material? Can you effectively be corrupted by what you see? And I just happen to think that is not possible. And in varying degrees, the other parties seem to kind of feel that there was something there. From maybe to totally, utterly, you are completely out of your mind. How can you possibly think that? So I guess it made for interesting listening.
Yeah, a lot of it was good yesterday. I didn't catch it all because I got pulled away in the middle of it and I need to go back. But yeah, it was entertaining.
Oh, don't call unpopular opinions entertaining. I mean, this is the...
Well, I mean, sometimes why shouldn't the B show be entertaining?
Oh, indeed. I'm reading here that May and Corbyn have been clashing over their anti-racism records.
Yep, I think this is a week where everybody calls everybody else racist.
Mrs. May said it was a disgrace that Corbyn had dodged his responsibility for tackling anti-Jewish prejudice. He said he was dealing with the issue and hit back that she should reflect on the impact of her own hostile immigration policies and problems with Islamophobia. It's just like, neither of which is, racism at the end of the day, dependent on obviously the particular strain of anti-Semitism that happens to be. Grief. It's just like, can't you agree you all have prejudices? This is, of course, because the Conservative Party was polled, wasn't it, about its opinion on Islam, and it was something like 42% of members thought that it was not great for Britain, and 15% thought it was a direct threat.
This was among polls.
This was a poll that I saw.
Sorry, yeah. I thought, well, hang on, why are they only asking polls in Britain?
Because they don't want to be racist, Britisher.
I just thought that was a very strange. Just for a moment there, I must have zoned out slightly. Hang on a moment, they're only asking polls in Britain about this.
Your particular ethnic lens always appreciated, Britisher. Yes, they were asking Burks the other week, but it was polls this week. Basically, the Conservative Party is concerned over Islam. Although I was surprised the number is as low as 42%. Although who knows what the revealed preference is, because you can't trust polls when push comes to shove. Let's see. Is there anything else? Academic agents.
Well, today there was, if this is of interest, today I think it was NBC that revealed some film footage. This is because of the big Epstein court case in America. They revealed some film footage of Donald Trump at a party years and years ago, in which Epstein apparently also was a guest. And one thing in particular that they really, really don't like is that I think there was some cheerleaders present or whatever, and they were really sort of bunching around Trump, if you know what I mean. So there he is, kind of surrounded by excited women, if you know what I mean.
Right.
And at one point, he kind of puts his arm around one of the waist of one of them and pulls it close. And as they continue squealing and shouting, he kind of pats her bum, before either walking away or perhaps the camera just was cut to another shot.
Is this Epstein or is it Trump?
No, this is Trump.
Okay.
And you just thought, oh my God, Donald Trump is heterosexual.
And to be fair to him, I did read the comments section on that on Twitter because I wanted to know, well, is it just going to be like loads of people condemning him as usual? And every single comment was, wow, they're dancing at a party. And it was quite, I don't know. Maybe it makes me wonder, like maybe some things get targeted by
Oh,
bots.
this is back when he was brunette rather than blonde. I can tell, you know.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know, maybe some things get targeted by bots, like certain Twitter accounts, like his own, just gets absolutely bombarded by bots and people just trying to jump on, trying to shred him. Whereas maybe NBC News' Twitter account doesn't so much, because every comment underneath that video that got like 1 million views was just, wow, people dance at a party and like occasionally touch each other. Shock horror. It was like really like, you guys really are Puritans now, aren't you? You know what I mean? Which I
Well,
thought,
I mean,
they are
obviously they
reaching.
were trying to kind of draw a parallel between his famous grab them by the pussy and by that remark and this, if you know what I mean. So immediately there was an attempt to link those two things.
And of course, the women in this particular shot look horrified.
Oh yes,
they?
yeah,
They
fighting him off.
recoil in horror. Many
Yeah.
of them reaching for the mace in their pocket. The fact that oh no, she's having another drink and moving away. There you go. The oh dear, I'm looking at the currently looking at the Guardian take on this. Footage of a friendly exchange between Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein at a party has surfaced after he tried to distance himself from the wealthy financier.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, he just basically said, "Oh, I didn't like the guy anyway." That's the way in which someone like Trump would try and dismiss it. So obviously, in those shots, he can clearly be seen laughing and talking to the guy. And I mean, what's wrong with that? There is no way in which anybody can be psychic and know whether anybody they're talking to is engaged in any sort of criminal activity. So. Trump obviously being Trump, kind of, oh, well, I never liked him anyway. So, yes, it clearly shows that, that's more than likely not true. But is anybody really greatly, taken aback by that? But then when they try and sort of tag him as, the creep, and you sort of go, hang on a moment, he's got all these women jumping around him. None of them seem to be fighting him off. What's your message here? What are you actually trying to say?
The thing, I mean, he's clearly drugged them all. I mean,
of course.
But the thing with the Epstein thing as well is Trump is being dragged through the gutter at the moment because he went on one trip. I can't remember what they were calling it. Basically with him, and didn't again. This is from 1992. This footage, for everyone wondering. And one curious thing to point out is people were saying, oh, it's when Trump was a Democrat. But also, it's well noted that he made a further comment where he said, I've known Jeff for 15 years. He's a lot of fun to be with. It's said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side, which is a really weird and interesting comment to make because even though Trump isn't a politician, that's quite a...
well, I mean, put it like this, 1992, so if that comment was from anywhere around about that time, Trump would have been in his 50s, right? Or close to 50.
Yeah, sure.
And so basically, if they fancy women in their early 20s, that would be women on the younger side, right?
Yeah.
Now you can read, you can in a way see, deliberately see it negative and sort of see, oh well, this can only this could mean one thing. Yes, it could, but is it likely to? So yes, if Epstein was having various affairs with underage kids, that still doesn't mean that he might not otherwise also have been attracted to young women.
Yeah.
And if Trump at the same time, who was putting on beauty pageants and God knows what, and clearly has always had an eye for the ladies. I mean, he's best really described as a New York billionaire playboy, isn't he? I don't read anything into that when I see a sentence like that. I think it's being presented in a highly suggestive way, and I find that is deeply unfair.
I mean, that's fair enough. But the funny thing as well, and people in chat have already mentioned it, is that of course Bill Clinton was very chummy with Mr. Epstein, and went to his apparently pedo island 26 times, compared to Trump's particular interactions with the guy, which were really quite slight, from what I understand.
So was it 26 times or was it 26 flights?
Bill Clinton.
Because I've heard, I mean, not to defend Bill Clinton, but I've heard that
he had flown at least 26 times on Epstein's plane.
Yeah. But I mean, one thing I would like to know was Epstein a Democrat donor?
Yeah, I think he was.
So if a major Democrat politician is flying around and kind of being pally with someone, I know people will immediately say, oh, there he is sitting on the fence again, yada, yada, yada. But to me, it's just, I think one has to be very careful with these kind of really toxic accusations.
Well, the only thing I can think about it, Epstein's pedo, but to what degree does a pedophile reveal himself, even to people, especially to associates, especially to politicians, especially?
Well, put it like this: I may be able to. And people will then immediately say, "Oh, anecdotal," because I know what the autists are like. But I actually knew someone who was eventually found guilty of grooming, and I would never have guessed. So this was, after the whole Rotherham and whatever. So this was an Asian, this was a Muslim, and yes, he was found guilty of that whole thing. And trust me, I was taken aback. And I am sure if I would have been...
That's a very polite way of saying it.
Yeah, I mean, if I would have been a billionaire and he would have been a billionaire, chances are there would have been photographs of us standing next to each other, talking and laughing. And yet I had absolutely no idea. And honestly, at the time when it happened, I sort of thought, oh, come on, this can't be true. This guy's been thrown under the bus. But the more that eventually emerged, and the more that some of the things that some witnesses had said correlated with other things that were happening around the country, the more obvious it became that, yes, that had indeed happened. And when something like that happens, it does kind of shake you up as to your ability to gauge people around you. It doesn't immediately make you paranoid, if you know what I mean, but you do kind of wonder, how is it possible that something like that could have been happening, right in front of you, if you know what I mean? There could have been a person like that right in front of you for years. Now, this wasn't someone who was an extremely close friend, but it was someone I knew. And we, once in a while, would bump into each other. We would talk, and yeah, absolutely no idea. And then like a lightning strike, something like that comes out of the blue.
Are you telling me that he consistently offered you cheese pizza?
No, he did not. No.
Oh, there's at least that to be thankful for. But a Britisher gate is real. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, yeah, of course, yeah, no, yeah. I'm more than likely open the gates of hell here. Yeah,
I thought it was British offence, but...
which wasn't that who made those? Rodin made those, didn't he? The gates of hell.
The gates of hell. I'm not familiar.
Well, there's a set of bronze doors which I believe he made, which are the gates of hell, which are kind of the counterpiece to the bronze doors in Florence, which are the gates of heaven.
Huh. I didn't know that. The on a less pedophilic note, because we're
Yes,
clearly
yeah. Let's go to a more happy chappy, delightful, sunny subject.
I have been
This
having
is somewhat grim.
I have been having fun with listening to a history of Western civilization this week, and which is one of the great courses. Hence my Mesopotamian anecdote earlier, and
Oh well,
knowing
there you
what
go.
the
Please, yeah.
Euphrates is. Um, I mean, I knew
Well,
what
as long as we all agree that it was all started by brown people.
Uh, why would you have to bring the race element into it? I mean, you're such a racial supremacist British. It's so frustrating. Get over yourself. But the thing I want to we're into Greece now.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sure Aristotle was pretty tanned.
He was after his encounters with Alcibiades. Alcibiades. Is that Aristotle who was in bed with Alcibiades? Or am I
Pass.
thinking of?
But I think Alcibiades was pretty much in bed with everybody, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
exactly. But I'm pretty sure one of the great philosophers he was having it off with, for lack of a better term. But no, so I've been learning about like the Minoans and everything that happened in Crete. And I was curious actually because it turns out that Crete had almost no defensive battlements. Or anything like that. They were a very unaggressive nation, which screwed them in the long run because, of course, that particular volcano decided to go off and destroy half an island nearby, and they were hit with a tsunami that wiped out half the island.
Well, yes, but I mean, I think in that regard, they more than likely would have bit like the British. But they had a natural moat. So
Yes, it is
that was effectively their battlement. That was the defense. Those were the defenses. So as long as they basically had a sufficient fleet to basically look after themselves.
Well, even their ports had no defensive fortifications. So,
well, I mean, who knows? Maybe they were the major naval power of the day.
It says, I mean, from what I've been reading, it seems to suggest not. They weren't that large.
I mean, if you want an example in that respect, the British were that casual about their security that at one point the Dutch actually managed to sail up the Thames, steal our flagship, and sail away with it. I think it was Admiral de Ruyter who did that. Yes.
Was that the Cutty Sark? Was it?
No. The Cutty Sark, that was a clipper ship. That's a much later.
No, the Cutty Sark is a museum.
Well, yes, it is now. Yes.
They gave that ship that they stole back very recently, right?
Yes, they had to rebuild it because a lot of it burnt. Yes.
Okay.
Oof, too many parties on deck.
I think there was as sort of snobbery goes between museums, the Cutty Sark always the Cutty Sark staff liked to look down its nose at the staff of the HMS Victory because the Cutty Sark was almost 100% original. They still had all the original gear, if you know what I mean.
Oh, yes.
But then, of course, they had their fire.
Yeah.
So then after that, they kind of lost the edge a bit, if you know what I mean, because now, yes, they've got as much stuff that is effectively refurbished, if not more than HMS Victory has.
But let's face it, everyone can laugh at the crew who are trying to restore the Mary Rose.
Well, actually, that reminds me, in Egypt, they're sort of, it's almost an act of futility, isn't it? They've built a huge museum somewhere in Cairo for $1 billion or something like that. It's a massive investment because they're so desperate to try and get tourists to come back.
Right.
And you sort of think, well, okay, you get rid of the Muslim Brotherhood and we'll come as tourists. Until then, we'll all have second thoughts. But one of the star exhibits that they're going to have in that museum are some boats. And it turns out that they found some like burial sites next to the pyramids. So the Giza pyramids, and into the ground were effectively sunk ships, which had been they're kind of like IKEA flat pack ships. So the parts are there. And these were kind of self-assembly boats for when the pharaoh rose after death.
Yeah.
And he, his servants no doubt would put the ships back together for him. Well, believe it or not, they've managed to rebuild those ships.
Oh, right.
Now, I think they've pretty much had to drench the whole thing in super glue in order to hold the fibers together, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yes, those are real ancient Egyptian boats. And yeah, the sight of that must be quite astonishing. So yeah, they're a step or two ahead of the Mary Rose. So one of the boats they've already managed to put together. I think the second one they're still in the process of doing. So not only is theirs together, but theirs is also 3,000 years old.
Yeah. I'm getting a couple of comments in the chat talking about your behavior when you were 20 years old.
Yes.
So first of all, though, Object of Hate says that Jimmy Savile applauded British's contribution to culture in the 70s. Portrait Seal says when the Britisher was 20 years old, he was made famous for being the first man to have 72 wives.
Well, why not?
And Count Elmsley says when the Britisher was 20 years old, he was mistakenly associated with the hashtag Labour grooming gang.
So when it was 20 years old, there was already such a thing as hashtags.
Oh, obviously.
Okay. Yep.
Let's face it, you've been 20 years old for a lot of history.
So these were kind of the cuneiform hashtags, were they?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, pre-written language, I think.
Oh yeah, these even predate written language. Okay.
Yes,
I'm with you.
Of course. And of course, we all know that the first cuneiform letter to be formed was the hashtag.
I like that. Yes, I like that. Yeah, so when it comes to your Western civilization thing, have you come... I'm assuming you've reached the Great Collapse, have you?
The Great Collapse.
You've gone past that.
I mean, you'll have to flesh out a little bit more, because it may not have been called that.
I think there's somewhere around about 1,200 or something like that, BC. There was this Great Collapse in Western civilization.
I mean, I am around that time period.
Okay.
What is this thing, Mark, that you're doing? Is it like a university course?
No, well, it's
series,
it's a lecture series, so it's 48 lectures from I can't remember the name of the doctor who does it now, but they're in half-hour segments, and
is it something with university? Is it?
Yeah, it's a university level course, from what I'm told. But
no, so it's around that time that pretty much the entire Middle East and Greece just basically packs up.
Maybe that's what's coming in my next lecture then.
So there has to be a kind of collapse. So when we think of ancient Greece, we think of the Athenians and the Spartans and the Thebans, but prior to that, you've kind of got the Mycenaeans and people like that, and of course also the Minoans and Crete.
Yes,
so you've got these older Greek civilizations.
As long as you don't have the myceliums.
So who's in the ascendancy at that point then? If the West TM is collapsing, who's in the ascendancy at that point? If
this
the
is
West
just it wasn't that one group kind of ascended and the other went down. It seems to be that kind of the civilization as a whole, that kind of civilized area as we would know it, kind of took an almighty wallop and was kind of set back several hundred years and needed to start over again.
I basically learned about the Assyrian Empire leading into the Persian Empire, the Babylonians, and then sort of jumped to the Hebrews and their conquest by the Babylonians, and then the Neo-Babylonians and the spread of the religious tradition. And then we moved to Egypt, and I learned about
when you were watching about the religious tradition, you were just sitting there going, "No, don't do it! Don't do it!"
Dear, my Catholic friends would be happy to hear that. Yes, and then I had learning about all the stuff surrounding Akhenaten and his son. and so on and so forth. But also just about the general change from polytheism to monotheism, and the rise of then dualism, which then became sort of perceptive through Minoan culture. And then, now we're on to sort of the fall of Minoa and the great works. So Iliad and the Odyssey and stuff like that, which is all fascinating.
Which, of course, that German found just by the descriptions that were actually in the Iliad. That he found Troy that way. Yes.
Wow. Because they were talking about how they didn't believe that it was. There were a couple of different theories about how the Iliad had come to be what it was. The first was that Homer had conceived it and written it himself, in which case it was probably incredibly flawed, because there was no way that he could have traveled to all the places that he mentions in his poems. But then there's the other issue, which is if it's just an oral tradition, and it's not particularly then anyone can make up anything that they want.
Yes.
For any part, and there would be discrepancies over time, and it's not clear when. Like, there's about a 500-year period where it could have been written in.
Yeah. No, I mean, when it comes to Homer, I like to think of it as, here is a chap who is wandering about telling tales, and I mean, within my lifetime, I still remember seeing documentaries sometimes about storytellers in the Middle East, folks in Iran and whatever. So
I have to correct myself, Richard. Yes, Zarathustra and dualism were. Sorry, I learned about dualism when I was learning about Zarathustra. Zarathustra, not about Minoa.
But no, he was so basically you would have to think of him as a chap like that, really going about just singing his songs, so to speak. But if you are living at a time when a huge amount of stories must have been going around, I mean, remember, these people didn't have television.
No, well, I mean, they would.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, the historians were talking about how they went to part of the Middle East, and they found some of these storytellers who are still alive today, who had memorized thousands of lines, tens of thousands of lines, and because it wasn't previously believed to be really possible, because we've changed the way in which we record history so much, but they hadn't, and so the idea that they managed to kind of note everything down and keep it accurate, and oral history was actually a prized thing back then. And it was poetic because it was easier to memorize and stuff like that.
That makes perfect sense. Yes.
Yeah, of course. And there was a period where the Greeks began to transcribe it and make first of all, they made a formalized version. People started to expect certain events to happen in a certain order and in certain places and with certain characters and so on. And then they formalized it when they wrote it down. And it's both a blessing and a curse, because you can still find that they can find writings of the Iliad and so on, but and therefore we know it existed, and we can see what people thought of it and so on. But at the same time, it killed the oral tradition for it, practically stone dead, because it was then formalized.
But what I was sort of thinking is, Homer had the joy of basically being the person of, whether he wrote it or whether people transcribed his tellings, he was the person who basically was the last of more than likely thousands of years of making up stories. And he basically was giving them the best of what effectively went back several thousand years. So
I'm just imagining that, like, you have all these really cringy top 10 channels on YouTube.
Yeah.
It's basically a walking top 10 channel.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. Yeah, you would have to think of him as kind of doing, okay, these are the best ones. And Because you can imagine over all this time in which no one was writing any of this down and whatever, you had these enormous stories arise. Some of them became kind of religious tales, and others became, Homer's Iliad. And if you look at just sort of the religious side of it, if you look at Greek mythology, you find bits and pieces of it in other mythologies of the Middle East, and you sort of think, well, it's clearly these are the stories that were going round at that time in that part of the world. But because he was in a way the guy who was the last one to do it, and then it became transcribed, everything is basically associated with him, even though he clearly was borrowing from something that went way further back than he more than likely could even imagine. So it's the same thing as if you basically now would take everything that has sprung up in the last 2,000 years, and you would now be telling this to an alien. So from everything, from the Bible story to Robin Hood,
CSI Miami.
yeah, everything. And they would basically look at you and go, oh my God, he is the greatest storyteller of all times. Because once you've written it down, it's done. You can't then do it again. It doesn't work in our time.
And you'd be the greatest storyteller of all times because you just have the biggest pirated video collection on your memory stick.
Precisely, yes.
And I've created them all.
little green ET man going up back to his planet, like, look, I have it.
Sometimes I go by the name Tarantino.
I have.
Yes, and that was the story of Robin Hood. And now there's another tale I've heard, which is called The Shawshank Redemption.
Was it Object of Hate points out that Homer is the Walt Disney of his age? Given that Walt Disney, of course, modified.
Have you ever seen what's it called? Saving Mr. Banks. Have you seen that movie?
Oh, I know of it, but I've not seen it.
It's remarkable because until I seen that film, I never knew that Walt Disney really tried as hard as he could to get the story of Mary Poppins, but the author, she just didn't want to sell it to him.
Amazing.
She just basically said, "Oh no, you're going to ruin it. That this, you put it out of your mind. You're going to ruin this completely." And apparently, it was that when he had two daughters, he read them that book when as a kind of
as a bedtime story,
and he immediately sort of thought, this is a perfect film. We have to make this into a film. And he got in touch with her, and the author just went, "No, I'm not interested. Go away. I'm not interested in having you turn my story into some ludicrous cartoon."
Yeah.
And for 20 years, he pursued her. Year after year, again, he tried to convince her, and eventually they managed to at least convince her to come over to America to their studios.
Yeah.
And he then put them together with some of the talent. And even though he still didn't have the rights, he tried to get them to, okay, look, if we can show her what we can do with this, that we won't just make it into something bland and completely ludicrous.
Yeah.
Maybe we can basically convince her to give us the rights. And yeah, that's what they eventually managed to do. Yes, but for 20 years, this chap, who normally always got his way, persisted with this one woman who just stubbornly would just always say, "No, I'm not interested. Just leave me alone."
I imagine she paid her a fortune, though, at the end of it.
In the end, he more than likely had to more than likely wheel out money by the wheelbarrow. And can you imagine how much money she must have made in royalties, from her book when that started selling again? But yes, the only reason I think they managed to persuade her to even talk to him in the end was because she was running out of money.
Strong. It's like when the banker's at the door. People are mentioning Varna Necropolis. I don't know anything about Varna. Do you, Richard?
Varna Necropolis. No, right now it doesn't spring. He doesn't say anything.
A place beyond the Britishers' sphere of influence.
I might just have to Google this and see if something comes up and I actually know what they're talking about.
A burial site in the Western Industrial Zone of Varna.
Oh, this is in Bulgaria.
Yes, internationally considered one of the key archaeological sites in world prehistory. The oldest gold treasure in the world.
Yes. Is this something to do with possibly being related to the civilizations that, or the cultures that disappeared under the Black Sea?
Oh, I have no idea.
Because obviously Bulgaria would border that, and one seems to have sort of come to the conclusion that the Black Sea seems to have been a kind of depression in the land, but it was dry until basically at the Bosporus, at the Dardanelles, the landmass broke from the pressure from the water, more than likely after the melting of the Ice Age. So the water pressure there built up as the sea level rose, broke its way through the Bosporus and flooded the entire depression that was the Black Sea. And that, of course, meant that, it was dry land. It was in close proximity to, obviously, Turkey, Mesopotamia, and so on. So the founding place of civilization. So obviously there would be civilization there. And then you suddenly eradicate it all by flooding it. So I think this is related to that one believes that this is some sort of relation to a civilization that has been completely lost.
Apparently there's a significant historical impact. It basically suggests another point of reference for the birth of European civilization, from what I'm reading here. But no, fascinating.
Well, those were the later. Those were the Thracians, weren't they? In Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And what was it? A funny thing happened on the way to the forum. Isn't there the general who boasts that he thrashed Thrace thrice?
I'm not that familiar with the fall of Thrace, so I can't see. Well, that does make an excellent addition.
It's obviously quite a humorous film, so they like to play with words, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. You imagine you'd hope that there was an ontological equivalent. Ontology. Am I using the right word here? Oh, for goodness sake! Now I need to look up. Nope, that's metaphysics. Never mind. I was basically trying to say that you'd hope that there was a play on words in the equivalent language at the time that was effectively as amusing. Yeah,
I mean the interesting thing also when it comes to the Thracians is, of course, dare I mention the Romans? They had their gladiators, and one of the most famous gladiator types is the Thracian.
Yes.
And of course, it has absolutely nothing to do with what Thracian warriors would have looked like. These are entirely kind of made up phenomena, the gladiators. It had nothing to do with any particular type that they associated it with. So obviously Thracian for them must have been something exotic. So they just gave the name, if you know what I mean. So they gave it that name. It was the Thracian.
I'm trying to think of a modern equivalent, sort of at this point, that where we've given someone something which is someone a name which is just completely divorced from what that thing actually is.
Yeah, I'm sure this is one of those things where I'm going to wake up at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night and go, oh yes, that. But obviously by that time the live stream is long gone.
I do like the idea that you'll you wake up in the middle of the night still vexed over something.
No, I'm afraid I am one of those sort of ponderers, and I don't even, sometimes I'm not even thinking about it anymore. And I will suddenly wake up in the middle of the night and the answer will present itself. And I'm just there going, why didn't I know this 5 hours ago? It's very strange. I'm assuming most people have these kind of things, that sometimes information processes extremely slowly and you just don't know why that is. I cannot believe that I am the only person who has this problem. That, the 6 hours after a conversation you've had, you suddenly remember what you actually wanted to say.
Mm. I mean, I think you're definitely not alone there, Bridger. So, but I can't believe where on earth did I bring up ontology? That's one of the things that, not going there. Whilst I ponder this, JS has sent in £5. Thank you very much, and says L. Ron Hubbard's works have been engraved on gold plates and placed in a mountain bunker. 1,000 years from now, future historians will assume we were all Scientologists.
Yes, yes.
Something about digital archives suggests, hopefully not.
Yeah. This reminds me of a Billy Connolly joke, in which he is actually talking about, the futility of having life vests on airplanes.
Go on.
In which he basically says, we've all got this little, we've all got this little life vest with a little whistle and all this, whereas perhaps a parachute might be more useful. Then he says, but I would just like the airlines one day, when they do their little, when the stewardesses up front, please, stewardesses, not cabin crew, stewardesses, when they do their little dance, pointing to the exits and whatever, he would just love it if just once they would be completely honest with you.
Yes.
And he would just say, ladies and gentlemen, in the unlikely event that all 4 engines on this plane should stop, we will hit the ground like a fucking dart. But as we are all hurtling to our death, we would appreciate it if you could put on your life vests. Because if you do, then in 300 years, when archaeologists unearth the crash site, they will think there was a river here.
What is it? It reminds me of a Flanders and Swan sort of mild sketch where he goes, I enjoyed... someone told us, why don't you write a song about flying? And he says, they're always very good to me. Michael Flanders was wheelchair bound, for those of you who don't know. And so he says, I sit here in the old wheelchair, and this is long before disability access was, routine and that sort of thing. So he says, they would discover which entrance is the closest to my seat, and they'd take me up the other one. And of course, the last time we flew, they took me up on a forked lift, of all the things, through the catering entrance. Why they need a great machine like that to lift forks, I will never understand. But they lift him up and they push him through, and he goes there, and he says, and then you of course have the briefing. So a nice lady comes up to you and tells you what to do when the plane goes down in the water, and what to do when you stop breathing. And then it chocks away, and everyone's ready to go, and then the whole plane starts to shake. And I have no fear, because I know that in this feat of modern engineering, every single part has been tested to the breaking point in order to make sure it is at the peak of engineering perfection. And he goes, and then the ashtray falls off. Oh dear, the days when you could smoke on a plane.
It does make me wonder about aeroplanes. Like, I've been on an aeroplane where, like, they're struggling to shut the door, and then like they had to kind of get a guy and like get him to bang on it from the outside, and just, I don't know. Then it's shut, and then when it's shut, they were like, "Yeah, we've got it now." I was thinking, it just took you half an hour to get that door shut. Do you know what I mean?
As long as you've got a crowbar to open it again.
Yeah, it took a guy on the other side with, on those like laddery things, like some engineer to like. I was like, I hope he was like pushing it shut. I hope that was the problem. Like we just can't get it locked. It's just a stiff lock. It's they're like a bus, aren't they, with wings? It's basically what they are now. And everybody's like, these things work. Don't worry about it.
Well, when it comes to the bus with wings, of course, sooner or later, they're not going to have a pilot in them.
you're statistically more likely to die crossing the road than you are flying to another nation. But then, of course, the airline buses do have instructions to keep the statistics favourable. So,
but yeah, it will come. The day will arrive when planes will be taking off without any pilots.
It doesn't surprise me.
I think there have already been sort of clearances given for trials to be undertaken, but so far, of course, only with transport aircraft, because they just know that the public won't wear getting into a plane with nobody in the cockpit.
I mean, we're a little way off that. I think you'll have to wait for a number of driverless vehicles to become mainstream before we allow
I'm not
flight.
sure, because I would think flying might actually be easier than the chaos on the roads. Because when it comes to flying, you've got masses of space, and the runways are nice and straight.
But believe me, Patricia, as someone who's worked in air traffic control,
you don't know what you're talking about.
It's not the flying from one side to the other that's the issue. Like straight airways and all that scheduling is fine. It's when you want to come down again at the other side, especially in places like, I don't know, the world's busiest airspace, like London.
No, trust me, I am fully appreciative of that. What I just find is there are no people in mopeds going, crossways across the runway as you're landing. There are no sort of oddly parked cars on either side of the runway as you're coming down.
Only if Extinction Rebellion get their way, and then.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, then we will all be issued with a rubber dinghy. This of course being a degradable rubber dinghy in which we can sort of row everywhere.
That's been something that's happening this week, actually. Not rowing everywhere, but Extinction Rebellion have surfaced in Cardiff and Bristol, and holding another time, gluing themselves to the pavement once again. And
did they once again try to sort of glue themselves to bits by their various private parts, or have they abandoned that plan so far?
Let me see. 16 protesters were arrested after they blocked the M32.
Did anybody see the ones where they were sort of stood on blocks of ice in gallows? And I was like,
I have no idea.
As if the ice was melting. And then they were in gallows. And I'm sat there looking at it thinking, that could go pretty horribly wrong.
Were they wearing shoes at the time?
That's hoping it does.
I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure. I'm not making it up, am I?
Were they barefoot or were they wearing shoes at the time?
I don't know.
Because, I mean, surely having someone stand on ice is a form of torture.
Yeah.
Yes, it is a little. That. Oh, I do have to say before we go too much faster, Mighty Balzac says, "Thracists." So is that?
Oh, I've got it. Yeah, I found it.
But yes. In Bristol, protesters glued themselves to a pink bathtub on a middle lane section of the motorway as demonstrations continued in Leeds, London, Cardiff, and Glasgow.
But they glued themselves by their hands or their feet, so not by their bristles.
Or by their breasts. 30 protesters blocked the M32 and 16 were arrested.
How many of them were punched in the nose by lorry drivers who really needed to get someplace?
I have no idea. They were also blocking ambulances, apparently. That was.
These are the people who claim that the entire country is going to collapse if traffic at the channel ports or whatever just comes to a halt for 12 hours or something like that.
Yeah,
and yet they are happily bringing traffic to a standstill all across the country.
Yep, they're like but to the point, like they'd have to keep this up for a year or something like that, like to make it so unfeasible to drive, right? Like it's so difficult. And of course, the second that they decide that the war is over and everyone's quit driving and they stop blocking the roads, there's going to be that one smart person who says, if I get into my car and just head along, I mean, really, like it's ludicrous. And you can't just like coerce people to stop. Like you can't bully people into saving the environment. That's not the way it works.
So yeah, I've sent a link into the side chat anyway. That's
What you should try when you've got 30 of them across the motorway is kind of arrive in sort of a horse-drawn chariot, but a scythed chariot,
Yeah,
and see if they move as you hurtle towards them.
it can't be real ice. Let me share this.
What am I looking at here? Hang on.
Let me share.
Oh yeah, but they've got shoes on.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's not.
you don't count then.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but what happened is if you, I think particularly in the Eastern Bloc, they liked having people stand on ice for hours and hours, and yeah, that really is a form of torture.
The frostbite, I'm sure.
So I was wondering whether they were actually torturing themselves. You know, like those folks that recently branded themselves like cattle.
Yeah, no, I did see that one as well.
Yeah,
I was kind of wondering whether they were going to those lengths again.
Oh, you've got it up.
In a statement to Unilad, that most officious of reporting stations, 3 students standing on tops of melting blocks of ice, ropes around their necks, below a gallows in the heart of a shopping area. We're expecting the obvious, being watched by a surprised, confused, and supportive audience.
Yeah.
Supportive? I don't know about that.
Those nooses are nowhere near tight enough, are they?
Oh no. Well, they don't actually want to die. They want to make a
but
point.
what I mean is, if you look at the nooses,
you wusses. They're not tight enough. They should have tight nooses.
If you look at the nooses, you would sort of think that if you actually pulled them tight, they could actually stand on the floor.
Yes.
Is that what that's about? Right. Okay. Still, you can still go wrong. Hopefully.
An ice cream company called Florideus made the icebox specifically for the purpose of the event.
And they wish to be associated with this?
I mean, you can see in the picture, they've got like bloody advertising next to them.
Have they really?
It's like, yeah. You can see there's like this little pop-up banner here.
Maybe they built the gallows for them. I mean, it does. I mean, clearly those 3 haven't built the gallows themselves, have they? But maybe I just feel like what? Like you just get a freezer and just take all the drawers out and get like a 5-gallon bucket, like the leftists were using to make cement when they assaulted Andy Ngo.
You can't expect them to have that level of expertise.
I've got a freezer. I'm retarded. Oh wait, no.
Just freezer.
I'm waiting for the other placard that kind of reads, these gallows were brought to you by Johnson and Smith, joinery contractors.
Oh dear. Lumberg says knows Flanders and Swan lyrics, but hasn't seen any movie pre-1980. How is this possible? Sad face.
I have to admit, I didn't know Clark Gable was straight away, and I dodged a lot of heat with that one.
I mean,
I think what it is that these are kind of big names from a golden age.
The biggest thing is I did have an inkling about, shall we say, let's call it an inkling of who Elizabeth Taylor was, but it was far more. But it was far more fun to torture the academician with the idea that I had absolutely no idea.
Of course, who Elizabeth Taylor was from Michael Jackson's "Leave Me Alone" video.
Sure.
Course,
I've definitely watched that video.
No, I mean, what I always put it down to, and therefore I think it is perfectly, in a way, understandable and thus acceptable. The reason the academic agent and I know films like this is not because we are somehow some great sophisticates. It's because we experienced an age in which on television films were put on, and therefore you got to actually see great, sort of libraries full of films, and therefore you quickly built up a knowledge.
He's only about 3 years older than me, though, right?
How old are you, Frog?
I'm about 33. Well, I am 33. Yeah.
He's about 5 years older than you are.
Oh, okay. I thought he was in his.
I mean, the 8 o'clock movie was a standard feature You know, that you would have on several channels, you would have a movie Someone in the Evening. And obviously, if you didn't fancy it, or if there was something better on the other side, but it was always there. And the thing is, like that, you got to see stuff you might otherwise never have tried. So one of the problems is, I mean, you can say, oh, well, nowadays on Netflix, you've pretty much got all films available. Yes, but you need to know which ones to watch. Whereas if there is a certain amount of curation by the broadcasters and they're kind of giving you these films to watch, you then get to know a lot of this stuff. Because this is no longer happening, you then can't really blame the people who are no longer exposed to the same phenomenon for not knowing these films.
I do also presume, Britisher, that you had access to a limited number of terrestrial channels.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that.
Did you catch the film last night? Ah, yes, the only one that was on.
To give you an idea of one of the phenomena that really will tickle many millennials, I am old enough to remember commentators at football matches beginning their commentary by telling you which of the two teams in the football match are wearing the dark tops. Because of course, when you were watching on black and white television, you know, telling you, oh, they're playing in red isn't really much use.
Yeah.
So they basically would tell you who are in the dark tops. And if you thought that you would recognize the team anyway, remember how blurry the old images were.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you were irradiating yourself with the old cathode ray tube, you know.
There's games that I remember that you watch back now, and you're like, how did TV look like that like 10 years ago? It's amazing how much things have come on, and you don't even notice it because it's happened so gradually.
Globus Hystericus says black and white snooker was a hoot.
Yes.
Apparently you could tell though. Could you tell?
I think you could tell by the differing shades of grey. Yeah. But nonetheless, yes, it was rather a challenge. One of the things you also have to remember that all the pictures were much smaller. TV screens were much smaller. So nowadays, when you watch something on a flat screen television that was on an old screen and it just looks blurry, that is because it's magnified by by various magnitudes.
Yeah. You have to remember, like, here's a piece of useless trivia. The doctors used to have to treat an awful lot of children back in this this old television era, because most televisions came as set-top boxes, you know, this sort of thing, and kids would sit there and stare up at them. So they used to have a lot of trouble adjusting necks because they were craned up. And now, in the phone era, they have the exact opposite problem of too many people with craned down necks.
I like that. That's good.
Yeah.
So my dad's saying, you know, him being uniquely positioned to experience both eras.
Yeah, one of the advantages in that regard of my era was that you wouldn't be in danger of stepping out into traffic whilst carrying a television.
No. And in fact, if you were carrying a television, that'd be quite impressive, and it usually wouldn't be on whilst it was there.
Yeah, I bet there was still more car accidents.
I do remember the switch from from standard definition to high definition.
I was wondering what your defining moment was going to be, you see. Not defining, but I was thinking...
I wouldn't call it my defining
No, but what the time was in your life, because I was going to ask you if you remembered like the launch of Channel 5.
Yeah.
Because you do?
Yeah.
Okay.
The launch of Channel 5, I remember...
sitting there on watching grainy TV because you couldn't get proper signal.
I remember, yeah, exactly right. So
watching the Spice Girls.
We remember Channel 5. I remember Channel 5 coming in and being terribly excited, and then we couldn't get it here. And so we had to go up to my grandparents' house, and they were the people who had Channel 5, and all this was a great luxury.
May I ask, I may be misremembering this, the early days of Channel 5, did that also include Keith Chegwin's most famous program?
The Naked Thing. I think it probably did. Yeah.
Wasn't that Channel 5? I think it was.
Yeah, I think it probably was.
So for those not knowing, this was pretty much a nudist television program.
What?
Yeah,
yes.
it's Keith Chegwin running around naked with like some other people. Yeah, I'm not sure why.
Whenever it comes to the nudists, I'm always reminded this is one of those things that is kind of immortal. On the continent, everybody knows of this. There is a series of films by a comedian, Louis de Funès, and he played.
Is that his real name? De Funès.
De Funès, yeah. I don't know whether that was an artist's name or whether it was an assumed one, but everybody knows him. And he played this. It was a series of films in which he is known as the policeman of Saint-Tropez. So obviously, this is one of the most chic holiday destinations in the south of France during the 1960s or whatever. And he played this incredibly uptight policeman. And there is this wonderful scene where they are basically ordered that they have to go and arrest the nudists on the beach, who are obviously, they shouldn't be doing this. It's against regulations, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So they come up with this ridiculously elaborate plan. Well, he does, because he's the commanding officer at the time. So first, they have 3 or 4 of them in frogman outfits. So they will be the divers who approach from the sea. Then there will be several coming from land. But then, in order to have their ace card, they have to have another officer who must infiltrate them. So you have this poor officer who is sent out with no clothes on, hiding behind Le Figaro newspaper frantically whilst all the others are laughing their heads off. And yes, eventually they end up, arriving on the beach and herding them like cattle. And yes, it's one of those really funny moments that you just have to see to kind of know what on earth I'm talking about. But yes, everybody on the continent knows of those particular films.
Well, fair enough. And with that, gentlemen, I'm afraid my voice is starting to go again. So I am going to bring us to a close, considerably earlier than usually would be a Fake Accents Unite. But I'd like to thank.
That is, of course, your excuse. What you're saying is on your mobile phone, one of those buxom brunettes has been contacting you again.
No, not 5.
Well, there you go.
But
just try this time not to wear yourself out to such an extent that you're not able to host your live stream on Monday again.
Oh, it'll be fine. But yes, I'm very much looking forward.
You said that last time that it would be fine.
I know.
And
but
here we are.
This time it really will be fine. So I'm really looking forward. I will see you all next week. Maybe Monday. I might bring it back one day for Sunday, depending on whether or not I'm being visited by friends. But I will let you all know on Twitter, etc. Thank you very much to my guests. Thank you for joining us this evening, Froggy.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. It's been an interesting experience.
It's a bit different, a bit of a slower paced Fake Accents Unite than
slower.
usual.
I got to learn about Mesopotamia and sort of Zoroastria, and it is. I don't know anything about that. It was a really long, interesting slog. Just waiting to jump in.
Just like
something that I know about.
Nothing to contribute. So note to self: if going to have a history stream, don't invite Froggy, or at least invoke many Froggies, so that at least one of them may have something to say.
Well, no, next time try and steer towards amphibian biology.
Yeah, I don't know much about that either, though. This is just like a chance nickname. I mainly know about. I try and follow the American side of things.
I still think that your chance nickname has a whiff of the French about it.
Yeah,
cheese-eating surrender monkeys. Anyway, good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening, Britisher.
It was an honor and a privilege, as per usual.
As always. Well, have a great week, everyone. Take care, and good night.
Toodle pip.